My name is Janine Caldwell, and I'm 58 years old. At my mother's funeral, I saw a smile I'll never forget. It wasn't mine, it was Carla's. While everyone else was crying, she was glowing. I didn't understand why until the next day, when the lawyer read my mother's will. My inheritance? A dusty old music box. Carla's? The entire estate, every dollar, every memory, every dream. I wanted to hate my mother for leaving me nothing, until I opened that music box. Inside was a note that said, "If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong." That's when I realized Carla hadn't just smiled at the funeral. She'd already planned it. Today, I buried the woman who taught me everything I know about love, resilience, and dignity, my mother, Margaret Caldwell. The rain fell in slow, deliberate drops, the kind that seemed to mourn with you. I stood beside her casket, my hands trembling as I held the single white rose I had chosen to place atop it. The scent of lilies was heavy in the air, mingling with the bitter perfume of grief that clung to everyone in attendance. My mother had been sick for months, but even as her health declined, she still managed to smile at me with that warmth only a mother can summon. Her death wasn't unexpected, but nothing, not even months of hospital visits and sleepless nights, could have prepared me for this hollow silence she left behind. The church was full, but I felt utterly alone. My sister, Carla, sat across the aisle, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, though her tears seemed forced, rehearsed, almost. There was something unsettling about her. While I could barely breathe through my sorrow, Carla looked radiant. Her lipstick too red, her posture too perfect, her smile faintly visible even as the priest spoke about ashes and dust. Carla wasn't my full sister, she was my mother's stepdaughter from a brief second marriage many years ago. We'd never been close. Where I had stayed by Mom's side through everything, Carla had swooped in during the final months like some kind of savior, claiming to help with arrangements and finances. She had a way of making every kind gesture feel like a performance. As the priest's voice droned on about eternal rest, I caught Carla laughing softly with one of our distant cousins. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make several heads turn. My throat tightened. How could she smile at a time like this? The funeral continued, but my mind drifted back to my mother's last weeks. She had been so weak, but she'd held my hand and whispered, "Everything that matters will be yours, Janine. You've always been my rock." I'd taken that to heart. The house we'd shared, the heirloom jewelry passed down from her grandmother, even the small bookstore we co-owned, I believed those would stay in the family. That was her promise. After the burial, people began filing out, murmuring their condolences. Old friends hugged me tightly, their words a blur. I nodded, smiled faintly, thanked them for coming, but I barely heard anything. My focus kept returning to Carla, standing near the grave with a glassy grin that didn't match the moment. She looked almost triumphant. "Such a beautiful ceremony," she said to an old neighbor, her tone breezy, like she was commenting on a wedding. "Mother would have loved it." Mother. The word rolled off her tongue like she owned it. I felt my jaw tighten. She hadn't called my mom that in years. In fact, they hadn't spoken for almost a decade until suddenly, last winter, Carla reappeared, claiming she wanted to reconcile. I remembered that day vividly. I'd been in the kitchen making tea for Mom when the doorbell rang. Carla stood there, wearing a fur coat and a smile too polished to be genuine. "I heard she's not well," she'd said, brushing past me. "I want to make things right." At first, I was grateful. Maybe it was good that Mom wouldn't die with regrets. But as the months went on, Carla seemed to take over managing Mom's medications, handling appointments, speaking to her doctor. She'd even convinced Mom to see a new lawyer to update her estate documents, saying it was for simplicity's sake. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I was too focused on caring for Mom. Now, standing in the damp cemetery, every one of those moments replayed in my head like puzzle pieces falling into place. Carla's constant presence, her eagerness to control every aspect of Mom's life, that smug little smile. The reception afterward was held at the church hall. Tables of finger sandwiches and weak coffee filled the room, but the atmosphere was tense. Everyone seemed to be whispering not about Mom, but about the will. "I heard Margaret changed everything recently." one woman murmured near the punch bowl. Carla's name was mentioned. Another replied, I wouldn't be surprised if she got the house. Their words stung. The will was supposed to be read the next morning. I told myself I wasn't worried. Mom had made her intentions clear. But deep down, unease gnawed at me. Carla floated through the crowd, thanking people for coming as though she were hosting a charity gala. When she reached me, her red nails grazed my arm. You look exhausted, she said sweetly, voice dripping with mock sympathy. Mother's passing must be especially hard for you. I forced a smile. It's hard for anyone who loved her. Her lips twitched. Of course. Well, at least she's at peace now. And soon, we'll all have closure. There it was, that word again. Closure. Coming from Carla, it sounded like a warning. I left early, unable to stand the sound of her laughter echoing off the church walls. Outside, the evening air was sharp and wet. I looked back through the glass doors. She was still smiling. That same infuriating, satisfied smile. When I reached my car, I paused. My hand was on the door handle when I heard her heels clicking behind me. Janine, she said softly. Her tone was almost playful. I turned slowly, my heart pounding. What do you want, Carla? She tilted her head, eyes gleaming. I just wanted to say, your mother always did love me more than you. The words hit me like a slap. I stood there, rain running down my face, unable to speak. She smirked, stepped closer, and whispered, See you at the will reading. Then she turned, walking away into the darkness with that same cold, knowing smile. I sat in my car for a long time after that, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Somewhere deep inside, I already knew tomorrow was going to change everything. The next morning, I drove to Anderson and Gold Law offices with a pit in my stomach. The gray sky matched the weight pressing against my chest. I'd barely slept. Carla's words from the night before kept replaying in my head. Your mother always did love me more than you. I wanted to dismiss it as cruelty, but there was something in her tone that felt almost confident. The reception area smelled faintly of coffee and old books. Several relatives were already there, cousins I hadn't seen in years, an aunt who avoided my eyes, and of course, Carla, sitting front and center in a cream blazer, sipping from a paper cup as though this were just another business meeting. Her legs were crossed, her posture impeccable, and that same calm, self-satisfied smile rested on her lips. I took the seat opposite her, clutching the small purse that still carried Mom's rosary. The lawyer, Mr. Halpern, entered the room with a solemn expression. He was an older man, soft-spoken, with the kind of voice that always sounded apologetic, even when he had nothing to apologize for. Thank you all for coming, he began, adjusting his glasses. I know this is a difficult time, but your mother, Mrs. Caldwell, was clear about her wishes. I'll read the will as it stands in its final revision. I exhaled quietly. Final revision. I remembered the day Mom told me she'd met with him, months before Carla returned. She'd said, Don't worry, sweetheart, everything's taken care of. The house will stay in our family. Those words had become my anchor through her illness. Mr. Halpern began reading. The room was still except for the faint hum of the ceiling fan. He listed the smaller assets, first savings accounts, jewelry, and the bookstore we co-owned downtown. My heart swelled at the mention of the store. It had been our shared dream, our second home. I could almost hear Mom's laugh echoing between the aisles of old novels. Then his tone shifted slightly, hesitant. To my beloved stepdaughter, Carla Jennings, I leave the entirety of my estate, including the Caldwell family residence, the bookstore, and all associated financial holdings. The words landed like a thunderclap. I blinked, waiting for him to correct himself. Surely, there was a mistake. But he continued, voice steady. To my daughter, Janine Caldwell, I leave the silver music box from my dresser, the one that plays Moon River. The air left my lungs. The entire room seemed to tilt. My mouth opened, but no sound came out. That can't be right, I whispered. Mr. Halpern looked up, expression regretful. I'm afraid this is the final, legally executed version, Signed and witnessed 3 months ago. 3 months ago. That was after Carla had come back. My pulse began to race. Carla placed a delicate hand over her heart, feigning surprise. "Oh my goodness, I had no idea," she said, her voice dripping with false humility. "I'm so honored she trusted me with everything. I'll take care of it all, Janine. Don't worry." I could barely breathe. My mother had promised me everything not because I wanted wealth, but because those things were pieces of her. Our life, together. Every inch of that home held her touch. The thought of Carla living there, touching her things, sickened me. "Mr. Halpern slid a small box toward me, the silver music box my mother had kept on her nightstand since I was a child. I stared at it, my reflection warping in its curved surface. "She wanted you to have this," he said softly. She was very specific about it. I took it in trembling hands. The metal was cold, almost biting. "She told me." My voice cracked. "She told me she wanted me to have the house, the bookstore, everything she built." Carla sighed dramatically. "People say a lot when they're sick, Janine. Maybe she changed her mind." The way she said it casual, dismissive, lit a spark of rage deep in my gut. I wanted to scream, to tear that smug expression from her face. But instead, I just stood up, gripping the music box so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The room had gone silent. My aunt avoided my eyes. A cousin whispered something behind his hand. I heard the faintest murmur. Maybe Janine did something to upset her mother. I turned toward them sharply, but stopped myself. Dignity. My mother always said, "Never let them see you crumble." Without another word, I walked out. The hallway outside the office felt longer than usual. My footsteps echoed as tears threatened to spill. I pushed through the glass doors and into the parking lot, the cold air biting at my cheeks. For a long time, I sat in my car, the music box resting on my lap. I wanted to open it, to hear the familiar tune, to feel some small piece of her again, but I couldn't. Not yet, not with that ache still twisting inside me. Carla emerged from the building moments later, smiling as she slid into her expensive car. She caught my eye and rolled down her window. "Don't be bitter, Janine," she said sweetly. "Mother just wanted what's best for everyone." I didn't answer. I just started the car and drove away, my vision blurring through tears. That evening, the house felt colder than it ever had. I sat at the kitchen table, the music box before me, gleaming under the lamplight. I ran my fingers along its edges, tracing the delicate engravings of roses and vines. Mom had received it from her own mother. It was one of her most cherished possessions. Finally, I turned the small key at its base. The melody began to play, soft and slow, the same lullaby she used to hum when I couldn't sleep as a child. My throat tightened as the notes filled the empty room. But then, something odd caught my attention, a faint rattle inside the box that didn't match the music. I tilted it, hearing something shift within. Carefully, I lifted the velvet lining. Beneath it was a thin, folded piece of paper. My heart stopped. It was my mother's handwriting, unmistakable, elegant, and slightly shaky from her illness. My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. The ink had smudged slightly, but I could still read the first few words. "My dearest Janine, if you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong." I gasped, hand flying to my mouth. The words swam before my eyes as a tear fell onto the page. Whatever this note contained, whatever my mother had tried to tell me, I knew it was the key to everything. The moment I saw my mother's handwriting, my entire body went cold. The paper trembled in my hands as I unfolded it carefully, afraid that any sudden movement might tear it or worse, erase the truth it contained. "My dearest Janine," it began. "If you're reading this, then something has gone terribly wrong. I pray that I'm mistaken, but I fear I'm not. There's something you must know. I don't trust Carla." I stopped reading for a moment, the words burning into my mind. I don't trust Carla. The air in the kitchen grew heavy. My mother had always been gentle with her words, even when she was disappointed in someone. To write something so direct. She must have been truly afraid. I continued. blinking through tears. She has been insisting I change things, saying it's for convenience, that it will make things simpler for everyone. But I've begun to suspect her intentions aren't pure. I'm too weak now to handle the legalities myself. If I cannot make this right, I need you to promise me something, Janine. Promise you'll look deeper if things don't seem right. I read the note 3 times before setting it down on the table. My hands were shaking. Look deeper if things don't seem right. Every interaction with Carla over the last few months flashed before me like scenes in a film, her sudden appearance, her insistence on managing appointments, her smug control over every conversation with the doctor and the lawyer. And then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in weeks. 3 months before Mom died, right around the time the lawyer said the will was revised, Carla had convinced me to take a short weekend trip. She'd said, "You've been under so much stress, Janine. Go clear your head. I'll take care of Mom while you're gone." I hadn't wanted to leave, but Mom had echoed her words. "Go on, sweetheart. A few days of rest will do you good. Carla's here, I'll be fine." When I returned, Mom looked weaker, tired. And Carla had this unsettling satisfaction in her eyes. She told me the lawyer had dropped by to adjust some paperwork. Nothing major. I didn't think to ask questions then. I trusted both of them. Now, that memory felt like a knife twisting inside me. I picked up the note again, scanning the bottom for more. But the ink trailed off, as though Mom had stopped mid-sentence. There was a faint smudge, as if she'd tried to continue but didn't have the strength. My chest tightened. "Oh, Mom," I whispered, clutching the paper to my heart. The next morning, I drove straight to Mr. Halpern's office. I didn't want to believe the worst, but I needed answers. The receptionist looked startled when I arrived unannounced. "I need to speak with Mr. Halpern," I said firmly. "It's urgent. It's about my mother's will." "I'm sorry," she said, glancing at the appointment book. "He's out of the office today, but his assistant, Paul, is here. Would you like to speak with him?" I nodded. A young man with tired eyes emerged from the back. He looked nervous, even before I said a word. "I'm Janine Caldwell," I began. "You were my mother's lawyer's assistant during the will revision, correct?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, I remember Mrs. Caldwell. Lovely woman. There's something I don't understand," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why would my mother leave everything to Carla? That's not what she wanted." "I know it isn't." He swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I can't discuss client details." "Paul," I said quietly, leaning closer. "My mother is gone, and I found a note that says she didn't trust Carla. If something wasn't right, if something changed suddenly, you need to tell me." He looked down, his fingers twitching. For a moment, I thought he'd send me away. Then he exhaled sharply. "All I can say is, your mother didn't seem entirely herself the last time she came in, and Carla did most of the talking." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "She came in alone once before that, too," he said, lowering his voice. "With some documents already prepared. Mr. Halpern reviewed them after Carla insisted they were your mother's revisions. It was all very rushed. Documents already prepared." My blood ran cold. "Did my mother sign them herself?" I asked. Paul hesitated. "Mr. Halpern witnessed her signature." "Yes. But—" He stopped. "But what?" He looked around nervously, as if someone might be listening. "There were 2 drafts. One before Carla's visit and one after. The handwriting on the first signature and the final one looked slightly different. Mr. Halpern dismissed it, said maybe her illness affected her writing. I felt dizzy. My legs felt like they might give out. "Thank you," I whispered. Paul looked stricken. "Please don't say I said anything. I could lose my job." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. I left the office in a haze, the world outside seeming sharper, colder. By the time I got home, the weight of it all hit me: the note, the will, the weekend trip. It all aligned too perfectly. Carla had manipulated everything, and Mom had known it at least enough to leave a warning. I sank into the living room chair, clutching the music box once more. My emotions swirled between grief and fury. How could Carla betray not just me, but the woman who had treated her like family? I looked around the room, my gaze landing on a small chest of drawers near the fireplace where Mom used to keep her letters, bills, and old correspondence. Something inside me said to start there. I opened drawer after drawer, rifling through envelopes, receipts, and yellowing stationery. Most of it was mundane bank notices, holiday cards, newspaper clippings. Then, near the back of the bottom drawer, I found a stack of loose papers tied with faded ribbon. My mother's handwriting again. My heart thudded. I carefully untied the ribbon and sifted through them. Most were unsent letters addressed to me, little notes she must have written during her illness. Apologies, memories, words of comfort. But one caught my eye, a sheet that looked different. The paper was thicker, the ink fresher. It wasn't folded neatly like the others, it was torn at the edge, as if ripped from a larger document. The letter began in her familiar cursive. If something happens to me, look at Carla's. And then it stopped. No more words. The pen stroke ended abruptly, trailing off midline. My heart pounded in my ears. Look at Carla's what? Finances? Emails? Documents? Whatever it was, my mother hadn't lived long enough to finish it. I sat there in silence, staring at the unfinished letter under the lamplight. The edges fluttered slightly from the ceiling fan's draft, almost as if her voice still lingered in the air, urging me forward. Don't worry, Mom, I whispered, clutching the page. I'll find out what she did. And in that moment, grief hardened into purpose. Whatever Carla had done, I would uncover it piece by piece. Sleep didn't come easily after finding that unfinished letter. Every time I closed my eyes, my mother's shaky handwriting burned behind my eyelids. If something happens to me, look at Carla's. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Carla's smug grin be the last word on my mother's legacy. I poured a cup of bitter coffee, spread the notes and letters across the kitchen table, and began mapping out everything I knew. Dates, appointments, hospital visits, anything that could explain how Carla had twisted her way into my mother's will. The first thing I noticed was how quickly Carla had reappeared in our lives. After nearly 10 years of silence, she showed up right when Mom's health began to fail. Then, just weeks before Mom passed, the will was changed. That couldn't be coincidence. I decided to start where it all began, the hospice. The Rosewood Hospice was a quiet place on the edge of town, surrounded by tall oaks that cast long, solemn shadows across the lawn. My mother had spent her final month there, and though I hated walking through those doors again, I needed answers. The receptionist recognized me instantly. Mrs. Caldwell's daughter, right? She said kindly. Yes, I nodded. I need to speak with anyone who might remember her, especially about visitors. A nurse named Marianne agreed to meet me in the courtyard. She was in her 50s, with the warm eyes and the tired gentleness of someone who'd seen too many goodbyes. I remember your mother, she said softly. She was a sweet woman, always asked about our families. She was very proud of you. Hearing that almost broke me. Do you remember Carla Jennings, my mother's stepdaughter? Her expression changed, slightly cautious, guarded. Yes. She came often near the end. More than you, actually. I frowned. I wasn't allowed to visit as much. Carla said Mom needed rest. Marianne's brow furrowed. That's odd. We never limited your visits. Mrs. Jennings was the one who told us you preferred to come on certain days. My stomach twisted. She told you that? She nodded. And she managed most of the paperwork. She said your mother wanted her to handle everything: medications, finances, even mail. Your mother didn't seem comfortable with it, but she was so weak then. I closed my eyes for a moment, rage simmering beneath my grief. Did anyone else notice? Marianne hesitated. One of the orderlies mentioned hearing an argument between them once. Something about the will. But by the next day, Carla was all smiles again. That was enough confirmation for me. My mother had tried to resist, and Carla had pushed her anyway. Before I left, Marianne touched my arm gently. Your mother talked about you constantly, Janine. Whatever Carla's done, your mother's love for you never changed. Her words gave me strength I didn't know I had left. When I got home, I went straight to my mother's desk, where she'd kept old legal folders. Buried under a stack of unopened mail was a manila envelope stamped with Anderson and gold. Inside were copies of earlier drafts of the will, older versions. I compared them side by side, tracing every line with my finger. That's when I noticed the signature. The handwriting on the final will was slightly off. The M in Margaret was taller, sharper, almost mechanical. My mother's usual signature had a soft curve, a flourish at the end. This one looked forced. A chill ran through me. Forgery. I heard my mother's voice in my head, gentle but firm, from years ago. Never let greed divide the family, Janine. It poisons everything. She'd been right. Greed had infected Carla's soul long before this. That night, I called my oldest friend, Nora Jameson. We'd grown up together, gone through school side by side, and she'd been my confidant through every storm. Nora, I said, my voice trembling. I think Carla forged my mother's will. There was a pause. Then a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. What? How do you know? I explained everything, the note, the nurse, the signature. By the time I finished, Nora was furious on my behalf. That witch, she hissed. You need to talk to someone in that law office, someone who might have seen what happened behind the scenes. I already tried the flash verse of positives the fame assistant, but he's scared. He hinted something was wrong, though. Nora was quiet for a moment, then said, I know someone. Remember Elena Burke? She used to work for Anderson and Gold before she moved firms. She was a paralegal there for years. Maybe she can tell you what really happened. I felt a flicker of hope. Do you think she'd talk to me? She owes me a favor. Let me reach out first. 2 days later, Nora called back. Elena agreed to meet you. But she sounded nervous, said she could only talk off the record. She's afraid of getting dragged into something legal. Where? I asked immediately. The cafe near Main Street. Tomorrow morning at 9. The next day, I got there early. The place was nearly empty, just the hum of an espresso machine and the faint sound of jazz on the radio. I sat in the corner booth, clutching a folder of everything I'd gathered. The rain outside tapped steadily against the window, echoing my nerves. A few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s walked in, hair pulled back neatly, eyes darting around as if to make sure she wasn't being followed. She spotted me and came over quickly. Janine? She asked. Yes. You're Elena? She nodded, sitting down. Nora told me a bit. I don't have long, but you're right to be suspicious. My heart pounded. So, it's true? Carla changed things? Elena glanced around again before speaking. Your mother came in once by herself, months before she died. She was clear about what she wanted everything to go to you. But about 6 weeks later, Carla showed up with her, claiming your mother wanted to revise the will to simplify her affairs. I swallowed hard. And she did? She seemed tired, confused. I remember thinking she didn't look like she wanted to be there. But Mr. Halpern said everything was fine. I pulled out the copies of the signatures. Look at this. Does that look right to you? Elena examined the papers closely. Her brow furrowed. No, that's different. The stroke pressure's wrong. It almost looks traced. I leaned forward. Can you tell me anything else? Elena's eyes darted toward the door. I shouldn't even be telling you this, she whispered. But Carla came back alone after that twice. Once to pick up documents, and once more to deliver something for your mother to sign. Mr. Halpern wasn't in either time. His assistant notarized them because Carla said your mother was too sick to leave her bed. I stared at her, my mouth dry. That's illegal. I know, she said. But officially, the firm believes everything was legitimate. I shouldn't have said any of this. She stood abruptly, gathering her bag. You didn't hear this from me. Understand? Wait, Elena, please. But she was already walking away. glancing nervously over her shoulder as she left the cafe. I sat there, heart pounding, the folder, open before me, my mother's signature, the false visits, the altered documents. It was all fitting together like a dark puzzle finally revealing its picture. Carla hadn't just manipulated my mother, she'd built her inheritance on lies, and I was going to expose every single one of them. The morning I met Elena Burke again, the sky was heavy with clouds, the kind that seemed to press down on you, as if warning that something dark was about to unfold. I'd barely slept the night before. Her final words from our last meeting, "You didn't hear this from me," kept echoing in my head. Still, I needed more. I needed facts, not whispers. Proof that my mother's trust had been betrayed. We met again in the same corner booth at the cafe, its worn leather cushions and steaming cups of coffee now symbols of both dread and discovery. I'd brought my notebook, a folder of documents, and my mother's music box for courage. It sat in my bag. A quiet witness to everything. Elena arrived looking even more nervous than before. She didn't order anything this time, she just sat, clasping her hands together. "Thank you for coming," I said softly. I can't let this go until I know the truth." She nodded, then leaned in. "Carla came to the office 3 times alone," she began quietly. "The first time, she said your mother was too weak to travel and needed her to pick up copies of the estate documents. The second time, she brought in a revised draft and claimed your mother had approved it verbally. The third time, she returned with signed pages, said your mother had signed them from her hospital bed." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Was anyone there to witness her signature? Elena shook her head. "No, that's the thing, Mr. Halpern wasn't present. Carla brought in those documents, already signed, and she insisted everything was legal because she held power of attorney for medical decisions." I clenched my jaw. "Medical power of attorney doesn't extend to changing a will." "Exactly," she said, lowering her voice. "But Carla was persuasive. She said your mother's mental state was declining, that she wanted to make things easier for everyone. Mr. Halpern was hesitant, but he's an old man." She pressured him. Hard. My stomach turned. I could almost see it happening, Carla sitting in that office, calm and confident, spinning her lies while my mother lay dying. "So she manipulated him," I murmured. Elena nodded. "Completely. And once the final version was filed, she came in again alone to collect copies. I remember because she left me her business card, just in case we ever needed family verification. She seemed so sure of herself. My hands trembled. She planned this. It wasn't spontaneous," Elena said grimly. "It was premeditated. Every step." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe's background chatter faded beneath the pounding in my chest. When Elena finally left, I sat there staring at the table, my breath shaky. I'd known Carla was manipulative, but this was calculated cruelty. She'd built her entire fortune on deceit. As soon as I got home, I called Nora. She answered on the first ring. "Well?" she asked anxiously. "She did it, Nora," I said, my voice breaking. "Carla changed everything behind Mom's back." Elena confirmed it. She forged documents and used power of attorney to pressure the lawyer. I heard Nora inhale sharply. That's unbelievable." "No, it's evil. We need to get everything on record. Emails, drafts, timestamps, anything that ties Carla to those visits." "I don't even know where to start." "You start," she said firmly, "by keeping a paper trail. Everything you've learned, write it down. Every conversation, every document. Because when this goes to court, they'll need evidence, not emotion." She was right. As much as my heart burned with anger, I needed to be smart. Methodical. Like Carla had been. That night, I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by papers. I labeled folders, printed old emails between me, Mom, and the lawyer, and took photos of my mother's signatures from other documents for comparison. Somewhere between rage and heartbreak, I began to feel something new: focus. Purpose. My mother deserved justice, and I was going to give it to her. Over the next few days, Nora helped me dig deeper. She had a knack for research and a fierce protective streak when it came to me. Together, we scoured everything we could find: public filings, notary logs, even Carla's social media. That's when things started to get strange. Carla must have sensed my silence wasn't ordinary. One night, as I was compiling documents, my phone buzzed. It was a text from her. "Carla, still mourning? Or plotting?" I stared at the screen, my heart skipping a beat. She knew. I didn't respond, but more messages came later that week, little taunts disguised as casual check-ins. "Carla, hope you're doing okay." "Carla, Mom would have wanted us to move on." "Carla, don't waste your energy, Janine. The past is settled." I deleted every one of them, though I kept screenshots just in case. Meanwhile, Nora was relentless. She called Elena again, who discreetly confirmed a few details in an email vague enough to protect herself, but strong enough to serve as evidence that something wasn't right. By Friday, I had a binder filled with notes, printed timestamps of Carla's visits, and even handwriting comparisons. It wasn't enough for a legal case yet, but it was the foundation of something. Still, each discovery left me more hollow inside. Every piece of evidence was proof that Carla hadn't just betrayed me, she'd betrayed my mother's trust at her most vulnerable. One night, after hours of staring at the documents, I broke down. My sobs echoed through the empty house. I missed my mother more than ever, her steady voice, her warmth, her way of making everything feel safe. I whispered through tears, "I'm trying, Mom. I'm trying to fix this." After I calmed down, I opened the music box again. The soft tune filled the room, mingling with the rain outside. It felt like she was there, like she was telling me to keep going. Then, just as the melody reached its end, my phone buzzed again. An unknown number. I hesitated before opening the message. "You're not the first person Carla's done this to." My breath caught in my throat. I read the text twice, my pulse racing. "Who is this?" I typed quickly, fingers trembling. No reply. I stared at the message, dread and curiosity twisting together in my gut. Someone else knew Carla, someone who'd been hurt by her before. Was it true? Had Carla done this to others, manipulated the dying, stolen their inheritance, and walked away, untouched? I didn't know who the message was from, but one thing was certain: this wasn't just about me anymore. I whispered into the still air, "You picked the wrong family this time, Carla." Because now, I wasn't just mourning, I was hunting. The message from the unknown number haunted me all night. "You're not the first person Carla's done this to." I must have read it a dozen times, each word cutting deeper. Who else could know something like that? And why reach out to me now? By morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I texted back again, "Who are you? Please, I need to know what you mean." Minutes passed. Then came the reply, "My name's Victor Hayes. I used to be Carla's stepbrother. We should talk." My heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what to expect. Another lie? A setup? But curiosity and anger burned brighter than fear. We arranged to meet at a small diner off Route 19, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and nostalgia. I got there early, nerves buzzing through me. Every time the door opened, I looked up, half expecting Carla to stroll in and mock me for chasing ghosts. Then he walked in, a tall man in his 60s, gray-haired, wearing a worn denim jacket. His eyes were tired but sharp, like someone who'd seen too much. "Janine?" he asked, extending a hand. I nodded. "You're Victor?" "Yeah, thanks for meeting me." "I wasn't sure you'd believe me." "After what I've been through," I said, "I believe anything's possible." He gave a bitter laugh. "That's what I said the first time Carla fooled me." As we talked, the story unfolded like a mirror of my own nightmare. Years ago, his father, Carla's stepfather, had been ill. Carla had come back into their lives suddenly, claiming she wanted to help him organize his finances. Within months, the old man's will had been rewritten, leaving Carla the bulk of his savings. When he died, Victor said, voice tightening, she sold everything. The house, the car, even the furniture. said it was her inheritance. I tried to fight it, but she had paperwork notarized, signed, sealed. I couldn't prove anything. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folder. Inside were photocopies of old documents, wills, signatures, statements. Here, he said, sliding one across the table. See this? My father's signature. Now look at the one from the supposed updated will. You notice the difference? I leaned closer. Just like with my mother's signature, there it was, the same mechanical precision, the same strange slant. My stomach twisted. She's been doing this for years. He nodded grimly. Always the same pattern. Finds an older relative, pretends to care, isolates them, rewrites everything in her favor, then disappears once the ink dries. My hands shook as I looked through his evidence-forged witnesses, fake notarizations, even letters Carla had sent to his father's lawyer. She'd left a trail, just faint enough to escape scrutiny but bold enough for someone determined to find it. Why didn't you go to the police? I asked. I tried. Without solid proof or living witnesses, it was my word against hers. She's clever, Janine. She knows how to make it look legal. I sat back, feeling both sickened and vindicated. Everything my mother had warned me about Carla suddenly made sense. Victor looked at me, eyes weary but sincere. When I saw your name in that article about your mother's bookstore, I recognized the last name, Caldwell. I knew Carla had found another target. You reached out because you wanted to stop her. Because I didn't want what happened to my family to happen again, he said quietly. For the first time since my mother's death, I didn't feel alone. There was someone else who understood the same kind of loss, the same quiet fury. He spoke constantly. He shared more documents, and I showed him what I'd gathered: the will copies, the handwriting comparisons, the testimonies from the hospice nurse and Elena. Together, we started mapping it out: Carla's pattern of deceit. It was all so systematic, so deliberate. Nora joined us one evening at my kitchen table, her laptop open, the walls practically covered in notes and timelines. She's a predator, Nora said bluntly. A financial vulture. Victor nodded. And she's been getting away with it for decades. Anger pulsed through me like electricity. But beneath it was something else: power. For the first time, I wasn't drowning in grief. I was doing something. Still, fear crept in. If we go to the authorities now, will they even believe us? We don't have a signed confession or forensic proof. Nora looked at me seriously. They'll believe you when they have something airtight. And we'll make it airtight. Every name, every document, every pattern. We build the case until even Carla can't lie her way out. Her confidence steadied me. Then that's what we'll do, I said. The next few days blurred into one long investigation. Victor reached out to old contacts, lawyers, notaries, even hospice staff who remembered Carla's involvement in past estates. Nora worked her tech magic, digging into archived records, public transactions, and property transfers. Each discovery made my heart race faster. Carla's name popped up again and again, attached to old deeds, sales, and financial transactions tied to deceased relatives. She's been profiting off grief, Victor muttered, flipping through pages. Like it's a business. One afternoon, Nora found an email trail from years ago, a lawyer mentioning Carla's insistence on privacy and discretion during an estate handover. It was damning, but not enough yet. We needed a confession, or something that proved intent. As we pieced the puzzle together, my emotions became a whirlwind: grief tangled with determination, anger mixed with a strange, fiery clarity. I could almost feel my mother's presence in the room, watching, guiding. "Mom," I whispered once, staring at her photo on the mantel, "I'm getting closer. I promise." By the end of that week, we had a thick binder full of evidence enough to raise serious questions, maybe even reopen old investigations. But we weren't ready to confront Carla directly. Not yet. Nora insisted on caution. "Don't tip her off," she warned. "If she suspects anything, she'll start covering her tracks." I agreed, though, deep down. I wanted nothing more than to face her. to look her in the eye and tell her I knew everything. The three of us were meeting at my kitchen table again when my phone buzzed. I assumed it was Nora sending another document. But when I looked down, my blood froze. Carla. We need to talk. Now. Before I could even process the message. Headlights swept across my window. I turned and there she was. Stepping out of her sleek car. Dressed impeccably as ever. That familiar smug smile on her face. Nora glanced at me, alarmed. Janine. Is that? It's her. I said. Standing slowly, my heart pounding. Carla walked right up to my front door, her silhouette framed in the porch light. She knocked twice, firm, confident, like she already owned the place. Then, through the glass, her voice floated in, honey-sweet and venomous all at once. Open up, Janine, we really need to talk. The knock on the door echoed through my house like a warning bell. I could see Carla's silhouette through the frosted glass, tall, composed, a predator dressed in silk. For a long moment, I stood frozen. Nora whispered behind me, "Don't open it." But I had to. I'd been waiting for this moment, even if I wasn't ready for it. I slipped my phone into my cardigan pocket, opening the voice memo app before. Unlocking the door. The quiet chime of the recording starting was masked by the sound of my heartbeat. When I opened the door, Carla's expression was disarmingly warm. "Janine?" she said, voice dripping with false sympathy. "You look awful. Have you been taking care of yourself?" I crossed my arms. "What do you want, Carla?" She sighed, feigning exhaustion. "I just came to talk. You've been acting strange lately. Digging around, calling people from the hospice, visiting the lawyer's office. It's worrying." Her eyes glinted. "I'm concerned about your mental health." I almost laughed. "My mental health? You're the one who forged a dying woman's will." Her eyebrows lifted, but her smile didn't fade. "That's a serious accusation." "Not an accusation," I said, stepping aside. "A fact." Carla hesitated at the threshold, then stepped inside as if she owned the place. She looked around, gaze lingering on the family photos and stacks of papers covering the coffee table. "You've been busy," she murmured. I followed her into the living room, careful to angle myself so my phone's microphone could pick up every word. "I know about your visits to the lawyer's office," I said quietly, "and about how you pressured him to accept a forged signature." She gave a light, dismissive laugh. "Oh, Janine. You always did have an imagination. Mother used to say you got that from your father." "Don't talk about my mother." Carla turned toward me, her face softening like she was speaking to a child. "I understand you're hurt. Losing a parent is hard. But you need to accept that Margaret made her own choices." I took a slow breath, trying to steady my voice. "You mean the choices you made for her while she was too weak to fight you?" Something flickered in Carla's eyes. For a split second, the polished mask slipped. "You really think I'd risk everything for a few papers?" "You didn't just risk everything," I said, stepping closer. "You stole everything." She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. "You act like I've committed a crime." "You have." Carla tilted her head. "If you had proof, you'd have used it by now." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "Stay calm, keep her talking." "I have enough," I said, voice steady. "Enough to show the will was tampered with, enough to prove you pressured Mom's lawyer, and enough to connect you to other estates you manipulated like Victor Hayes's father." For the first time, she froze. Her pupils narrowed slightly. "Victor Hayes?" she repeated slowly. "You remember him, don't you?" I said, watching her reaction. "Because he remembers you." Her lips pressed together in a thin line. "He's lying. He has documents." Carla's tone sharpened. "Documents can be forged, too." I stepped closer, my voice trembling with rage. "So, can signatures." That was when her smile finally broke. Her expression hardened into something colder, sharper. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she hissed. digging into things that don't concern you. You were never satisfied, Janine. Not when Mother was alive, not now. You always needed to be the favorite. I didn't need to be the favorite, I snapped. I just wanted her to be safe from you. Carla's eyes darkened. Safe? Please. That woman treated me like an outsider my whole life. After everything I did for her at the end, I deserved something back. So you manipulated her will to make it fair? Her voice dropped to a hiss. She didn't have long left. I made sure her assets went to someone who actually appreciated them. That's not manipulation, it's justice. My breath caught. She'd said it. She'd actually admitted it. Say that again, I whispered. Carla's gaze flicked to my pocket, the faint glow of my phone screen. Her expression twisted into rage. You're recording me. I stepped back, my hand instinctively covering the phone. You just confessed, Carla. She lunged forward, grabbing my arm in a vice-like grip. You delete that right now. Her nails dug into my skin. Pain shot up my arm, but I refused to flinch. Let me go. Delete it, she shouted, shaking me. You think anyone will believe you? You're desperate. Broken. You're... Carla! The shout came from the doorway. Nora and Victor stood there, having rushed in when they heard the commotion. Victor moved quickly, pulling Carla back, while Nora stepped between us. Get out, Nora snapped. Now. Carla straightened her blouse, her composure snapping back like elastic. She smoothed her hair, pretending nothing had happened. This is a mistake, she said coolly. You're all making a terrible mistake. I could still feel the sting of her grip on my arm. The mistake was trusting. You. Carla's eyes narrowed. You have no idea what you've started, Janine. Neither do you, I said. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. The silence that followed was thick and electric. Nora rushed to me, gently examining the bruise already forming on my arm. Are you okay? I nodded shakily. I got it all, I whispered. Every word. She admitted it. Victor looked grim. Then it's time to make her pay. That night, we gathered at Nora's house. I played back the recording, the sound of Carla's voice echoing through the room. I made sure her assets went to someone who actually appreciated them. That's not manipulation, it's justice. Nora leaned forward, eyes fierce. That's enough to show intent. Enough to get the lawyer investigated. Victor nodded. And once that starts, her whole history will unravel. We spent hours compiling the evidence transcripts, dates, witness statements, copies of documents. Nora even formatted it all into a clean chronological file, labeling each section like a case report. When we finally sat back, exhausted but proud, it felt like a victory. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over yet. Carla wasn't the type to give up quietly. A few days later, Nora managed to get us a meeting with a private investigator she trusted, Daniel Mercer, a retired detective with a reputation for uncovering hidden fraud. We met him at his downtown office, a small space filled with file boxes and the faint smell of old paper. He listened patiently as we explained everything, the forgery, the manipulation, the confrontation. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. I've dealt with people like your sister before, he said. They hide their tracks well, but they always leave something behind. If she's been doing this for years, there'll be a money trail. He stood, walking to a filing cabinet. Give me 2 weeks. I'll start digging into her financials, property transfers, offshore accounts, anything that ties her to the fraud. As we left, he stopped me at the door. Janine, he said, his tone grave. I've already done a quick background check on your sister, and I think you'd better brace yourself. I frowned. Why? He handed me a manila envelope. Because you won't believe what I've found about Carla's finances. When Daniel Mercer, the private investigator, handed me that manila envelope, my palms were sweating so badly I could barely grip it. I opened it with trembling fingers as he watched quietly, his eyes steady and serious. Inside were several sheets of paper, printouts, and bank statements, all tied to one name, Carla Jennings. "What is all this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "Proof," Daniel said. "Your sister has offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Large deposits hit those accounts right after each of her relatives passed away. The timing isn't a coincidence." My breath caught. "You mean she's been doing this for years?" He nodded grimly. "At least 4 confirmed cases. The money always routes through shell companies before landing in her personal accounts. But that's not all." He reached into his drawer and slid over a printed email thread. These came from a source inside the law office. Turns out Carla paid Paul, the lawyer's assistant, $10,000 under the table right around the time your mother's will was revised. I stared at the email chain, bile rising in my throat. The subject line read, "Follow up. The signatures are ready." "She bribed him," I whispered. Daniel nodded. "And once the money cleared, the documents were notarized without proper witness verification. It's classic estate fraud." For a moment, the room spun. Every suspicion, every painful doubt I'd carried since the funeral had been confirmed. Carla hadn't just betrayed me, she had violated my mother's dying trust. All for money. "Can this hold up in court?" I asked, voice shaking. Daniel gave a small, reassuring smile. "It's more than enough to open an investigation. And if the lawyer caves under pressure, which I suspect he will, she's finished." I clutched the documents tightly. "Then let's end this." The following week was a blur of tense meetings and paperwork. Daniel worked fast, filing reports with the district attorney's office, while Nora helped me organize every shred of evidence we had. Victor reached out to local reporters, determined to make Carla's crimes public once the time was right. When the subpoena arrived for Mr. Halpern, my mother's lawyer, I was there to see it delivered. He looked pale when he opened the envelope, and even paler when Daniel and I walked into his office the next day. "We know about the bribe. We know about the falsified notarization. It's over." He sank back into his chair, face ashen. "I never meant for any of this to happen," he muttered. "She told me your mother was dying, that she wanted to make things easier for the family. I believed her." Daniel set the printed emails on the desk. "You took her word and her money." Mr. Halpern's eyes glistened. "She said it was just a family adjustment. I didn't realize she'd already forged your mother's signature until it was too late." "So you admit it," I said quietly. He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Yes, and I'll testify to that. I'll give the DA everything." It was the confession we needed, the final piece that would bring Carla's web of lies crashing down. 2 months later, the courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the benches, their pens scratching furiously as Carla sat at the defense table in her immaculate gray suit, looking every bit the innocent victim she pretended to be. But beneath her composure, I saw the flicker of fear. The prosecutor's opening statement painted her as a master manipulator, a woman who preyed on vulnerable relatives for money and power. Exhibit after exhibit displayed the evidence: offshore transfers, falsified wills, emails to bribed staff. When Mr. Halpern took the stand, the room went silent. His voice shook as he confessed everything: the bribery, the forged signatures, the guilt that had haunted him since. "I failed, Mrs. Caldwell," he said, eyes wet. "I let greed and pressure cloud my judgment." Carla Jennings orchestrated the entire deception. Carla's lawyer objected, of course, but it was useless. The evidence was overwhelming. As I sat there, I felt something shift inside me, a release. Like the air was finally clearing after years of suffocating smoke. Justice was no longer a dream, it was happening right before my eyes. When the verdict came in, it was unanimous: guilty on all counts of fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation. Carla's jaw tightened as the words echoed through the courtroom. Her eyes darted to me, blazing with fury. I met her stare without flinching. Outside, the courthouse steps were crowded with reporters. Cameras flashed as I walked past, holding my mother's old rosary in my hand. The headline would appear the next morning: "Local woman convicted of estate fraud in shocking family scandal." The article painted Carla as the manipulative inheritor who had stolen from her dying stepmother. My name for once was cleared. That night, I drove to the cemetery, the first time I'd been there since the funeral. The air was cool, the sky streaked with stars. I knelt beside my mother's grave, brushing away a few fallen leaves. "Mom," I whispered, "it's over. She can't hurt anyone else." I kept my promise. The wind rustled through the trees, soft and almost warm. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. In the days that followed, my phone rang constantly. Relatives who had once whispered behind my back now called to apologize. "I'm so sorry, Janine," my aunt said through tears. "We didn't know what she'd done. We thought maybe—" "I know," I said gently. "You don't have to explain. None of us wanted to believe someone in our family could be that cruel." Even Victor called one evening, his tone lighter than I'd ever heard it. "You did it," he said. "She's finally facing justice. My father would have been proud." "Your help made it possible," I told him. He chuckled softly. "Just promise me you'll rest now." But rest still felt distant. The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks later. Carla sat silently as the judge read the verdict, sentencing her to 10 years in prison and ordering restitution to all affected estates. Her attorney tried to argue for leniency, but it fell on deaf ears. When it was over, she turned toward me, her eyes cold, her voice a low whisper only I could hear. "This isn't over, Janine." I met her gaze, unflinching. "Yes, it is." She smiled, that same eerie, knowing smile she'd worn at my mother's funeral before the bailiffs led her away. As she disappeared down the hallway, a strange calm settled over me. The nightmare that had begun with that smile was finally ending, or so I thought. Because later that night Daniel called me. His tone was uneasy. "Janine," he said, "I just finished digging through the last of Carla's files, the ones she kept encrypted." My stomach dropped. "What did you find?" He hesitated. "Something big, something she didn't do alone." My heart pounded. "What do you mean?" He exhaled heavily. "You'd better come in tomorrow. You won't believe what I've found about Carla's finances and who's been helping her." It was nearly 6 months after the verdict when I finally walked through the front door of my mother's house again. For a long time I had avoided this place, the air too thick with memories, the walls echoing with things unsaid. But now, as I stepped inside, there was a stillness that felt different, not hollow or haunted, but calm. The legal settlement had finally cleared. The court ruled that every asset Carla had stolen, every penny she'd hidden, every account she'd disguised was to be returned or liquidated. The house, the bookstore, the heirlooms, all restored to me as my mother had always intended. I stood in the living room, running my hand across the back of the old couch where she and I used to sit with tea on quiet evenings. The sunlight poured in through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like tiny spirits. For the first time since her death, I felt her presence not as a wound, but as a comfort. Carla was serving her sentence now 10 years, with no possibility of early release. The media had moved on to other scandals, the noise had died down, and her once perfect reputation had crumbled to nothing. Her assets were seized, her social circle evaporated, and her name became synonymous with greed. And as for me, I was finally free to breathe. With Nora and Victor's help, I decided to do something meaningful with a portion of the restitution money. Something that would honor my mother instead of letting the past rot in bitterness. I started a small community charity called Margaret's Light, dedicated to helping seniors with legal literacy and estate planning so that no one else could be manipulated the way my mother had been. We held free clinics every month at the local library, and every time I saw an elderly person walk away with newfound confidence, I felt like I was protecting my mother's spirit all over again. The grand reopening of our family home took place that spring. Nora brought flowers and champagne. Victor arrived with his usual dry humor and a camera slung around his neck. Together, we moved through the house, restoring small pieces of the past. Nora placed fresh peonies, Mom's favorite, in a vase on the mantel. Victor hung back near the hallway, studying an old photo of Mom and me from years ago. "She looks proud," he said softly. "She always was," I replied. We toasted quietly in the kitchen, surrounded by laughter and the sound of floorboards creaking beneath familiar feet. For once, there was no tension, no grief hovering in the air. Just warmth. Later, when everyone had gone, I wandered through the house alone, touching each piece of furniture as if greeting old friends. I eventually found myself in Mom's old bedroom. The air smelled faintly of lavender, the scent she loved most. I opened her dresser drawers, not looking for anything in particular, just remembering. And then, in the bottom drawer, beneath a stack of neatly folded linens, I found a small envelope sealed in pale blue wax. My breath caught when I saw her handwriting, "For Janine, when all is quiet again." My hands trembled as I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. My dearest Janine, if you are reading this, then the storm has passed. I hope you've found your way through it with the strength I always saw in you. Life has a way of testing us, of forcing us to see the worst in others but also the best in ourselves. Don't let bitterness take root, my darling. Forgive where you can, even if it's only to free your own heart. I trust you'll find your peace, because you were always my peace. I pressed the letter to my chest, tears slipping down my cheeks. Her words felt like a benediction, a final embrace I didn't know I still needed. In that moment, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The rage that had driven me, that had once felt like fire in my veins, was gone. What remained was gratitude. Gratitude for the truth, for justice, for the love that still lingered in every inch of this house. I walked to the living room, where a dotted, cracked family photo frame sat on the coffee table. The picture inside was from years ago, Mom and me in the garden, sunlight in our hair, her arm around me. I'd kept it in a box during the investigation, unable to face it. Now, I gently replaced the broken glass and set the photo back on the mantel where it belonged. Her smile in that picture, gentle, kind, real, seemed to glow in the fading light. The next morning, I visited her grave again. The grass had grown back fully, the headstone polished and bright. Someone, Nora, I suspected, had left fresh lilies. I knelt down, resting my hand on the cool stone. "Mom," I whispered. "It's over. Everything's how you wanted it. Carla can't hurt anyone anymore. And I'm okay." The breeze rustled softly through the trees, carrying the faint scent of spring. I closed my eyes, imagining her hand on my shoulder the way it used to be. For a long time, I sat there in silence, just listening to the wind and the distant chirp of birds. I thought about everything, the lies, the loss, the nights I cried myself to sleep thinking justice would never come, and yet, somehow, I had made it through. I smiled faintly, tracing the carved letters of her name with my fingertips. "You were right, Mom," I said softly. "Greed divides, but love always finds its way back." As I rose to leave, I felt lighter than I had in years. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the cemetery in golden light. It wasn't symbolic, it was real, warm, grounding. I turned one last time to look at her headstone. The pain was still there, but it no longer controlled me. It was simply part of the story. And as I walked back toward the gate, I caught my reflection in a passing car window. A faint, tired smile spreading across my face. It wasn't the brittle smile I'd forced through grief. It wasn't the defiant smile I'd worn in the courtroom when justice was served. This one was different. It was soft, genuine, born from peace, not victory. "This time," I whispered to myself, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. When I smiled, it wasn't out of victory, it was out of peace. In the end, justice wasn't about money, it was about peace. Carla lost everything she stole, and I gained something far more valuable: freedom from the bitterness she tried to leave behind. My mother's legacy lives on, not in possessions, but in the strength she gave me to fight back. Some wounds never vanish, but they do stop bleeding. And this time, when I smiled, it wasn't out of revenge, it was out of peace. If you believe that truth always finds its way, no matter how deep the lies are buried, then don't leave this story without sharing it. Your one click can keep stories like my mother's alive. So hit like, subscribe, and help me spread her strength. Because justice only lives on when we tell it out loud. And tell me honestly, If someone you loved betrayed you for money, would you forgive them or make them regret it?